Hi, I'm Richard Sharp, and today we're going to be going over how to do a deadlift. A deadlift is another one of those staples of any strength training program. Pretty much every sport does it. Pretty much every kind of strength athlete does it. Any kind of actual like collegiate athlete, no matter what you're training for, deadlifts are huge for almost everybody. The biggest reason people don't do deadlift, if they don't do it, is usually the perceived risk versus reward factor, and that is because deadlift, just like any lift, but with deadlift especially, it is a lift that will punish you if you have incorrect form. With correct form, it is an amazing, probably could be considered by a lot of people the best lift for really so many different muscles. It works so much. It's a great total body lift, and so it's loved by many, hated by few, but with correct form, there's no reason not to implement this in your strength training program. And so first, let's go over the muscle groups used. Although there are a lot of small muscle groups that are involved in just holding the bar and whatnot, your main muscle groups that are really being worked in a deadlift are those in your quads, and so your vastus lateralis, your vastus medialis, your vastus intermedius, and your rectus femoris. You have your hamstrings, your semimembranosus, semitendinosus, and your bicep femoris, and then of course your gluteus maximus. And so a lot of people, they don't like the deadlift because they think it hurts their back, either that being their spine or they think it's a back workout that they don't like a lot. The thing is, the deadlift should not be a back workout. Now, it's true that if you've never deadlifted before, or you're just starting deadlifting, you've never really done it before, you might get a little bit of back soreness just from having your back engaged and keeping it straight, right? Any kind of exercise with a hip hinge is gonna engage that erector spinae just a little bit to keep your back straight and not use your back. But once you get used to doing a deadlift, once your erector spinae just gets used to good form, it's not a back workout. It shouldn't be a shoulder workout or anything like that, but it should all be lower body. And when done correctly, primarily it should engage your hamstrings more than anything else. And so that should be the muscle group you're really focusing on when doing a deadlift correctly. And so when doing a deadlift, there are two main ways, main different types of form that you're going to do, or that you'll see people do in a deadlift. The first one is conventional, and it is generally the most common, so why it's called conventional. And that is, you're going to have your feet right at shoulder width apart. You can have them straight. If you want to have them a little bit slanted outside of straight, that's okay. And you're going to pick up the bar from the floor with weight on the bar. It's not really going to be actually on the ground as this one is. Obviously there's no plates on it, but when putting any kind of plate, even a 10-pound bumper plate is going to lift it up the ground considerably, so you're not having to go quite as low. But you're going to want to try to keep your back as straight as possible. You're going to do a bit of a hip hinge just to get down, and you're going to be doing that same thing that we've talked about with the squat, where you're kind of pawing the ground. You're almost trying to like imagining your feet are hands, and you're trying to grab the ground underneath you with your toes and the ball of your feet and your heels. And so that way you're keeping your feet, as much of your feet on the ground as possible. You're keeping them as stable as possible, and then you're wanting to like push out as you do the lift. That just ensures that you're not doing any kind of valgus of the knees. You're not endangering your knees or any other part of you with bad form. And so just to start, we're going to imagine the bar's not on the ground yet. There are two, even within the two main ways to do a deadlift, there are two more grip styles that are used to do a deadlift primarily. There's the overhand closed grip, which is very obvious, overhand and closed, and it's going to be common, so like maybe right outside your shoulders. It's probably the most common, but you'll also see a lot of people do the same grip, but just alternated. I usually, with weight on the bar, do alternated, and so just for that purpose, I'll do it here, even though it's just as easier to do both overhand. And so you're going to be starting when you pick up the bar right about at your shins. And a key thing to remember with the deadlift is throughout the entire lift, you want the bar as close to your shins as possible, to where it's literally dragging against your shins and then your quads on the way up. That's why you'll see a lot of people at lifting competitions, they wear long socks when they do deadlift, because the closer you can get that weight to your center of mass, the more you're going to be able to lift. Right? If I take a 10-pound plate and lift it out here, it's gonna be hard to hold because it's away from my center of mass. If I'm holding it right here, it's gonna be easy. It's that same premise. And so you're trying to split the ground, almost like you're trying to like tear the ground apart between your legs. And holding the bar, you wanna keep your back straight, hinge your hips, and then you're gonna go down. So in a real lift, you'd be grabbing the bar right here, right? And so what you're gonna do is you're just gonna pull it straight up, keeping your back straight the whole time, and you wanna keep your head neutral. A lot of athletes, me included, have a tendency to kind of always wanna look straight in everything they're doing. As a track athlete, I think that just comes from when we run, right? We always wanna see what's ahead of us, but when you're in the weight room, it's not good for your neck. You never wanna have that bend in your neck while you're doing a lift. And so you wanna keep your head in a neutral position. And so at the bottom, your head's gonna be looking, I don't know, a couple feet out in front of you at the ground, not straight forward. And so what you're gonna do is you're gonna pull, keeping that bar as straight, close to your shins and in as straight bar path as you can. And you're just gonna pull, keeping your back straight, and then you're gonna push your hips back in. And so just in the way that you go down, the first thing you do when you're going to grab the bar is you're gonna hinge your hips back. That's gonna be the last motion whenever you're pulling the deadlift up. And so you're gonna be from the bottom, you're gonna come up, come up, come up, get to your knees, and then you get a little bit of a hip hinge. And that's gonna be your lockout. Whenever your hips are hinged and you're all the way up, that's when you're locked out in a deadlift. And so the other common way to do a deadlift is the same exact lift. The only difference is you're spreading your feet out into a sumo position. When you see sumo wrestlers, they're very wide stance, and so that's where it gets its name. For the most part, your grip's gonna stay about the same, although it actually might be a little bit narrower. And this position, this deadlift variation is often used for taller athletes, where it's harder for them to get that bar all the way down here. If they have really long legs, got a long way to go to get down. I'm obviously not one of those athletes, but if you were a taller athlete, you don't have as much to go down when you put that angle at the knees. And so you know your feet are about the right width when you're down at the bottom. See, mine were a little bit wide. When you're down at the bottom, you want your shins to be about vertical. It's okay if they're in a little bit, but you don't want them like this. You're not even gonna be able to get low enough. So you want them wide to where when you go down and your knees go out, your shins are just about vertical, and then they're gonna have a little bit narrower grip, but other than that, it's the exact same. Your head is in that neutral position. You're going up first, unhinging the hips and locking out at the top. And so when you do those things, you're making sure you're keeping your back straight, making sure you're engaging those hamstrings and everything at the bottom. You shouldn't have near as much of a risk for an injury as people perceive that the deadlift actually has. All those injuries from deadlift is gonna come from poor form. And so that's why whenever you're doing a deadlift, whenever you're teaching a deadlift as a strength coach, always go through form first. Just practice with the bar. It's an exercise. With any exercise, you wanna obviously teach it first. You wanna practice it first with low weight. But with a deadlift, you wanna be especially careful, making sure they have all the steps pretty much perfect before you really go for heavy weights on a deadlift. And then once they get that down, it's one of the most beneficial exercises you can put in your strength program. And so that's the deadlift. Thank you.